Morning, everybody. By now, you've probably heard that we have received the beta version for numbers. Those were released to us late last night because when Egnard says something like, hey guys, could we release these things at a reasonable hour so that I don't have to go rushing to my computer to update the community in the middle of the night? It goes unheard because nobody will ever love me. I did post the numbers themselves onto Discord, and I promised you guys some thoughts, and I do have a lot of them when it comes to the version 4 numbers, and we will get into that right after the intro. All right, so version 4 numbers, for those of you living under the rock, I'm going to put them on the screen for just a little bit right over here. We see a couple of changes, right? Predominantly in the RD3 area. So the damage reduction is going down from 33% to negative 25%, and the damage increase is going down from 50% to 33%. And what people have noticed is that the numbers for RD4 and RD5 have stayed consistent throughout the last three versions, which, interestingly enough, has caused a lot of flip out between a lot of players in the community. Um, we're gonna get to that, but first, I want to semi paraphrase, semi read something that was given to us as part of this statement yesterday, and to give you guys a little bit of extra context on a few things. So, again, I don't know when the beta is ending, but I do know that because of everything going on with some testing snafus, and with a lot of the changes to the numbers, that it is being expanded beyond the original time frame that the beta was supposed to release, right? And the reason that I'm telling you this seemingly small information is because I do think that it is important to understand that CG is taking the feedback that we are giving them very seriously. Now, with that said, I do think that there are a lot of players who just don't understand that our feedback isn't just what we are saying to them vocally, but it also is the data from the playtest itself, the numbers from the battles itself. So no matter what I say or what other testers are saying, they are going to look at the data and kind of determine the win rate averages that they want to see based on the hard evidence, and using the things that we are saying. I don't want to say with a grain of salt, but in conjunction with those numbers. I did say on Discord yesterday, I had it confirmed that the Relic economy changes are going to be released alongside of Relic Delta. So that is going to happen immediately when Relic Delta releases. However, I don't have any more information on that. That is something that we were not given. We were just told that, yes, once this releases, those economy changes are going to release immediately. And from what I understand, Relic 10 will be releasing immediately upon Relic Delta's release as well. Where it's going to go, I don't know. How we're going to acquire it, I don't know. I have no idea how any of these changes are work. This is just the information that was provided to me. Now, um, when it comes to Relic Delta in its current form and where it's at, I think what we were finding in testing was that Relic Delta 1 and Relic Delta 2 is pretty comfortable, and win rates were not changing by any significant degree, but that there was a huge, huge jump, a huge steep curve for the majority of teams when it came to getting to Relic Delta 3, right? With those 50% increased damage numbers and the 33% damage reduction numbers. Not only were we getting hit too hard, we were also dealing so little damage that battles that normally took like 3 or 4 minutes, they just were taking too long within the 5 minute timer of the game. And we were seeing too steep of a climb between the win rate drops at Relic Delta 2 and Relic Delta 3, which is why we are seeing that shift downwards. Now, when it comes to Relic Delta 4 and Relic Delta 5, I'm just going to read what we were told. If counters continue to work semi reliably at Relic Delta 4 and reliably at Relic Delta 3, as some of this discussion on the topic today suggested, Relic Delta won't be serving its purpose. We believe that at Relic Delta 3, counters should struggle to win, but still be able to if you're overcoming with better mods, better datacrons, and or better tactical execution. Our stance is that counters should completely lose at Relic Delta 4. That is too large of a gap to facilitate growth and satisfy what is needed from the system. The RD5 numbers exist as in case it wasn't clear, you really shouldn't be winning this. Obviously, the gimmick counters still work at Relic Delta 5, but that's only a handful of teams that we're not currently looking to curtail. So obviously, I don't know if any other creators have said those specific words in the last 8 hours. But this is kind of what we've assumed from the playtest is that Relic Delta 4 is kind of the cutoff. And I've seen a lot of players kind of suggest that as well on my Discord and on other Discords, and frustration with that. And I'm going both ways with this just to say that, when I look at my roster and I look at other rosters and I look at you using .gg insights and trying to determine what counters are best for me in GAC, it's very rare that you are seeing a matchup beyond 3 relic levels for an entire team that is going to be reliably winning as it is right now without Relic Delta. There are a couple of, gimmick teams that still do those winnings. Treya is one of those teams where there still is a pretty considerable chance to win at Relic Delta 4 and 5. And they've already suggested that that's something that isn't going to be changed. I still am of the opinion that when you give players a steep curve like this, it's almost like a slap in the face. And, it's almost like, okay, hey, you're going from no change to very little change to a huge jump in change. And that can be a really tough pill to swallow for people, myself included. And to that extent, I do think that the Relic Delta 4 numbers should still be considered and dropped lower. I don't disagree with the core philosophy. I do disagree with the steepness of the curve. I would say, yeah, I know that I had advocated for Relic Delta 5 ending at 100% damage and negative 50% damage reduction or increased damage reduction. Given that what we know contextually now, and given the fairness of the system, I think, like to see, being a reasonable person, that the Relic Delta 4 numbers should maybe be 75% increased damage, and maybe 40% damage reduction. I think that would put us in a position where those Relic Delta 4 win rates are still incredibly low, but, in very niche opportunities, you will find players being able to still overcome it, which maybe isn't what CG wants, but I think that there is something to be said for hope, right? And that is, we could go into the whole Luthen and the rebellions built on hope and everything like that, and link it into Star Wars. But I think that when it comes to playing a game like this, hope for a win can be a powerful thing, even though the win rate is seemingly very low. And bringing that just that false hope almost to Relic Delta 4 would maybe help people out a lot. But now, with that said, when I've been doing my testing, and I've said this on Discord, I do need to give Fatal a huge shout out. I know he has his own community, but he has been the unsung hero of beta testing in terms of how seriously he has taken it, and just how intensely he has been thinking of the processes of other players and the average players. And it has really helped build out what we are seeing now in the more positive sense for players. But what we are seeing essentially from testing is a lot different than I think the system that a lot of players are thinking about. I think that players see any degree of number, and I've seen some really major flip outs about a lot of the numbers. But then we go into testing, and we try out the counters, and we go, oh, this is actually not that bad. My team is still winning. My team is still winning reliably. My team, it might be taking 30 seconds more, which of course is annoying to me because we talk about the time nature of the game, and that is a big deal for me. But I'm still winning. And then it becomes, oh, I'm actually still winning on auto in a lot of the less mechanic heavy fights. Um, so I have definitely become a little bit more positive on the system overall in the last week, right? So CG, you win in that regard, that you've mostly won me over as understanding that the system is not going to be as detrimental to the player base as I originally thought, as I thought after reading some of the context, as I thought after seeing different versions and numbers kind of release out to the community. Um, I still obviously have my short term reservations. However, they have been very communicative in answering a lot of those reservations. I obviously do not have concrete answers on things like assault battles, but I still, I have at least a promise when we've talked about assault battles and looking at the lower bounds of what people have been completing them on and setting levels based on those lower bounds. I think that in practice, hopefully it'll be exactly as they say they are. Um, the only major short-term hang up that I'm still seeing here, of course, is really understanding what they are going to do with Conquest and how they are going to solve the feat problem. Um, I don't have an answer for that right now, but since it'll be turned off in Conquest until at least the Strangers Conquest is over, they do have time to figure that out. Um, the one thing that I kind of said this before, but when it comes to Relic Delta 4, I look at my account, which I understand is almost 14 million. But even in my growth of my account over the last couple of years, and going from being a very casual player to a very locked in player to becoming someone who creates content for the game, and having to build myself up through that, those Relic Delta 4 situations are very, very, very exceedingly rare. Uh, and I think that people are seeing those Relic Delta 4 situations and they're blowing the hell up. And they don't realize just how rare those situations are, and I see people kind of posting on Discord saying like, oh, my Relic 4 team isn't going to beat this Relic 8 team now reliably. And, you can ask those people the question, like, is it beating it now? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is no, right? The answer most of the time is no. It's not actually doing that thing reliably now. And it leads me to the question of, so then what does it matter, right? Um, So all of that is to say that at this point, I've given numbers on how I feel about this system um, multiple times, and I was down as low as like a 2 in the beginning, and then a 4 a little bit more recently. I think I'm somewhere between like a 6.5 or a 7 on this system right now, And I think that players, when they play the system, I don't think players, like, wow, this is so great. This is amazing. Wow, the game is awesome. I don't think that that's going to happen. But I do think that players are going to say, oh, I am not as affected as I thought I was going to be. And I do think that, there has been some testing on mixed relic teams. There has been some testing on mixed relic enemies, not as much testing. But I do think that people are looking at the idea of full teams and saying Relic Delta 4 of a Relic 5 team versus a Relic 9 team. And they're not considering the fact that in a lot of those situations, it really is only going to take bringing one or two characters up to higher relics in order to achieve the same goal that you were achieving before. And a lot of the times, those characters that you are going to bring up to higher relics are characters that you're going to need at higher relics anyway. I'm going to give you an example. I was testing with Bane, Bane plus one at Relic Delta 4 with a Relic 4 character, and he was getting completely annihilated at RD1. Um, but the reality is, that when you're talking about a Relic Delta 1 at Relic 4, when your stats are skewed in a very weird way because you're not hitting the stats correctly, um, Bane is a character that you want at, Relic 7 or Relic 8 anyway. And the survivability that he gets from that Relic 7 or that Relic 8 anyway does change the dynamic of how Relic Delta interacts with him. There are a lot of situations where we talk about like Bo-Katan Mandalorian, right? And testing being done at Relic Delta 3 or Relic Delta 4. And the reality is that Bo-Katan Mandalorian is is basically a hard Relic 7 team anyway, as a bare minimum. So at least in the confines of the game, as it will stand when Relic Delta releases, you're looking at a maximum of Relic Delta 3 happening. I do think that there is going to be a shift in GAC. I do think that players in Bronzium to Erodium are going to be short term affected by this over the next 2, 3, maybe 4 months, as there is going to be a shakeup. I do think that there are going to be a lot of mid game players in those leagues who have very big accounts, but maybe not robust accounts, maybe not great modding. They don't understand the mechanics of the game as much, but they have been playing a long time. They're going to be forced to move up because their opponents can't beat them, and they're going to find a new shift more towards the higher end of Erodium and Kyber 4, Kyber 5. And you're going to see a little bit more fairness after those 4 months, after those 3 to 4 months in those leagues, as those players are bounced out. Now, that does not account for the player who is not highly engaged and ignores GAC often. Those people, I have my ideas of how to account for that. That those people are still going to be screwing over a lot of players if they choose to attack, but it is going to be a considerably smaller space of players overall. Again, I know people are going to call me a shill for saying this. I do think that CG has said and their stated purpose and their stated goals of the beta test and trying to get us on board and use our opinions and discussions as a sounding board for being able to help build out this system. I still very much take them at face value as being genuine in this regard based off of the feedback that we have given, and feedback not being something that just because we said it doesn't mean that it's going to happen. I still would like to see the Relic Delta 4 numbers come down a little bit. And considering that the test is being expanded and extended for an unknown length of time, I think there is an opportunity for that to happen. I do think that there's a chance for that to happen. Um, but again, I'm more positive than I was before. My final thought here, a little bit on the smaller end, the short term end. Yesterday, we were doing some testing on self damage, um, not self damage, team damage against your own team. And it seems like, that is happening. I'm not 100% confirmed on that. Like 95% confirmed on, a high level General Grievous doing damage to his own allies and it taking Relic Delta into account. And I do think that, allies should be exempt from those damage increases. But I also think it is such a small issue, a seemingly very small issue, because the biggest part of that is going to be General Grievous, who generally stays at Relic 7, and most of his team stays within Relic Delta 2 of that anyway. So I think it's a small issue. Just a fun, silly Easter egg, I guess, if anything else. But not to pad the view time on this video, I will keep you guys updated. I will continue to give my very loud, very annoying, very tactile and aggressive opinions to CG on the hopes that we continue to get more information, that they continue to be more forthcoming and transparent with us. And I commend them for doing that, and to a greater degree with such a large change to the game as the test of whether or not that's something they should continue to do. Um, so with that said, everybody, peace out. Have a great rest of your day.